Amit serves as a director within Forensics Integrity Services practice at Ernst & Young LLP, where he spearheads the data science and analytics teams dedicated to forensic services activities. With a Bachelor of Technology degree, Amit brings over 15 years of experience in forensic technology and risk data analytics. His proficiency lies in deploying technology-driven solutions for financial investigations and risk management, catering to diverse range of industries, including insurance, e-commerce, retail, banking and finance, telecommunications, digital wallets, and manufacturing. Prior to his tenure at EY, which spans 6 years, Amit has accrued valuable experience in Deloitte and Infosys. He is proficient in databases, analytical tools, software enterprise, and a very experienced in image processing and computer vision. Currently spearheading the development of doc authorization solutions at EY, an innovative proprietary system designed to detect irregularities within the transaction-related documents, showcasing a commitment to cutting-edge forensic technology. He has won multiple awards and for excellence in client service in his 6 years tenure at Deloitte. I welcome Amit to take over. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you, sir, for the introduction. I'm Amit Mishra. The session which we're going to talk about is AI-empowered frauds. Now, before I talk about frauds, I think Arjun did a great job in terms of explaining about what all frauds can happen and what does AI have a play in it. But I'll try to keep it more interactive, and I'll try to make sure that whatever he spoke about, there will be some overlaps, but obviously I'll be talking more from how AI is enabling fraud as opposed to stopping it. Obviously, we'll also talk about how we can stop it, and then also quickly talk about one of the solutions which we have, which helps prevention of frauds, where a lot of clients are using it, especially when they come from a CRO or a CFO perspective, right? Now, a lot of you, I believe, are from the IIA team. So as you guys have to make sure that your line of defense is really working, and you should also understand why a solution is really, really important. Now, before I go in terms of talking about frauds, right, I think the major thing which we all need to understand is the type of financial fraud which happens globally is just enormous, right? These numbers which you are seeing right now is just an indicative number which gets reported. The numbers which doesn't get reported may be much higher, but what we are talking about of the global GDP which we have, close to 5% of the global GDP goes in financial crimes. So that is the impact which you are talking about from a fraud perspective. That means every 100 rupees which we generate, we lose 5 rupees out of it just because of frauds. Forget about everything else. And this is global numbers. This is not just talking about only for India perspective. These are global numbers. In terms of frauds and fines, just from financial crimes and just from money laundering, the fines were close to $7 billion. So now if you are not able to identify a fraud, you cannot do a fine. But the problem is the identification of fraud itself takes anything between 12 to 18 months. And by the time you identify a fraud, the money has already gone out of the ecosystem, right? So that's the most important thing. You have to identify the frauds much faster. Now we all, I think AI, Gen AI is the buzzword. Everyone talks about it. But first I really want to understand, does anyone really understand what is the difference between AI, Gen AI and machine learning? Any answers? Please feel free to answer. I really want to understand what do you basically understand when you say Gen AI? How is it different from machine learning and how it is different from AI? Anyone? Please, there's no wrong answer here. Please. And I'll try to keep this very interactive because we have to be very interactive in this session.
Artificial intelligence is something, the data is being loaded from what are the sources available, and from there the results are being given. Whereas machine learning is something, it's being keep on learning. It can be information is being loaded from the learnings, and also sometimes will be unlearnings also will be there, so it will be keep learning. So
okay,
this is the basic planning I have.
What about Gen AI? What about Gen AI? This is the keyword which buzzword everyone has been talking about. Gen AI, ChatGPTs of the world, the Claudes of the world. What is Gen AI? We all talk about Gen AI. We all use Gen AI. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room will be either using Perplexity, ChatGPT, or their own LLMs which the firm has, or maybe even Copilot, doesn't matter what GenAI you are using.
It is something more upgraded than AI, where it can refine from the audio, or even when you upload the data from there also it can give a result. So it's upgraded than the general, than the normal AI.
Perfect. Anyone else about GenAI?
GenAI
Please,
gives us
ma'am, go ahead.
results. GenAI gives us results as per how it is trained, and it pulls out information from OpenAI, and therefore it gives us results based on what we want to generate.
Acha, we have been talking about GenAI. Does anyone know how many combination of parameters have been taken into account when they are creating a GenAI system? Just guess, any random guess.
Zillions of them.
It's not zillions, but every LLM model will have its own combinations of parameters on which they are trained on. The ChatGPT, when it was created, it was trained on 80 billion parameters. So basically anything in the world which is happening, right, it will be taken into account of it. So again, just explaining more from I'll try to explain and not go into technical details. Best example is artificial intelligence is when we started talking about robots, right? When people started talking about robots, can any system mimic what a human is doing? That is AI, simple. It's as simple as that. You would have heard about RPAs. RPA is not Gen AI, RPA is not ML, RPA is pure play example of AI, right? Then over the period of time, we started making sure that the system, so there was no intelligence into the system. It was just mimicking an action. For example, if there is a file of folders in your, let's say, in your email, you create a rule saying that, okay, you know what, these 10 folders, when you get the data, dump into this particular folder, right? That is mimicking what you could have done manually. So that is AI for you, right? That is typical example of an AI. ML is where you bring in intelligence as well. That is where if you're saying learnings and everything, there you are bringing intelligence into the ecosystem. That means a lot of reinforcement happens. And that is the reason machine learning becomes more important. So all the examples of predictive analytics which you took, any kind of prediction, classification, all those are examples of doing what we talk about from a machine learning perspective, right? Then obviously deep learning was much more advanced version of it. Deep learning, you might have heard about the CNN models and everything, right? There you are doing prediction, but also making sure that without prediction as well. Because to do a prediction, first someone has to do a classification, do a tagging, which means, okay, this is a true positive or a false positive. Deep learning made sure that based on the data itself, can you identify certain parameters, can you identify certain thresholds, which can easily be configured and say whether this is something and do the prediction. So without even a human intervention, a deep learning can actually do the predictions, right? And then when we talked about Gen AI, as ma'am rightly mentioned, you know, the lot of training, but Gen AI is basically an LLM model. Now LLM models are large language models. The difference between ML and Gen AI is Gen AI will create content, it will do the answers and everything, but it will not do a prediction. I'll explain you the example. Gen AI will not solve mathematical problems. Please understand that. For example, if you have to solve something like a mathematical equation, or when you talk about predictions, you have to have some bit of models, right? Any algorithm which you have to use. Let's say you try to run fuzzy matches. Fuzzy matches uses an algorithm called Levinstein theorem, right? Those things will not come in Gen AI. So you'll have to again go back to deep learnings and the machine learnings of the world. So Gen AI does not mean that it will solve everything, but yes, from a content creation perspective, wherever you have text, wherever you have any images, that is where Gen AI will come. Any questions till this point, or any questions, please feel free to ask. Any comments? Okay. Clear on this slide how the journey of, you know, the technology has been over the period of time. Now, I think we all talk about how AI and Gen AI has been really, really helpful and what people think, right? The actual reality is people confuse AI with Gen AI a lot, right? AI still means, again, as I mentioned, right, automating something without putting in intelligence into it, right? Just mimicking a human behavior or human pattern which was being done and just mimicking it, right? But even that is something which has not been leveraged by a lot of firms. You still, I believe you guys are from IIA and some people are from compliance. I can tell you most of the people still from a compliance monitoring, they might not even have a solution. They might still be using Excels for that matter, right? Similarly, when you talk about IIA, the audits which you do, the audit calendars which you use, the audit methodology which you use, these are still in Excel. They still do not move into, migrate into a system, right? Those are the things where we have to make sure that we are leveraging technology. So the biggest example I will give you apart from AI, apart from IA is, let's talk about any of the processing of any of the transactions, right? Let's say your vendor processing. Vendor processing even is very manual today. Yes, some bit of automation has happened that, maybe you're using an OCR system to read through the documents and key in the information, but the review of the documents and taking a disposition in terms of whether it's an issue or not is still very manual in nature. Those are the issues, those are the things where AI, ML, Gen AI, whatever, I would not use AI, just I'll say technology can help. And that is where I think we all need to understand how do we, kind of leverage the technology. Now, these are some of the benefits that the most of the people which very worry about that, a lot of jobs will be gone because of automation. That is a reality, but the solution is how do you repurpose the people? How do you retrain the people to make them more effective as opposed to saying that they will, lose their jobs or you let go of people, right? It's all about how do you make sure that you're repurposing the people as opposed to letting go of people. So yes, it will happen almost 51%. So basically net 50% of workforce can be, negated with the help of AI. The other big parameters is actually looking at piercing new markets. Now, let's say typically when you used to do, identification of new markets, you'll try to do some research and everything, right? Can the system do it? Yes, the system itself can take, okay, you know what, this particular segment, let's say I'll take an e-commerce, right, and talk about a fashion site. Let's say I talk about Nykaa. So in Nykaa, if they have to do any analysis, they will have their own brand managers, account managers who will try to do the analysis, right? Now, can the system identify which region, which product is not working, and what we need to do, from a correction perspective? Those are the things which the system can do, and where those people who are doing that research from an operation or a market perspective can easily be done by the system itself. So these all parameters will actually over the period of time change, but the key thing which I really want to talk about is this thing, increase of profitability. What will happen is over the period of time, because your operations will be more effective, it will reduce the overall cost from a operation perspective, it will improve efficiency. You will see efficiency of close to 60% if you are using AI or AI-based technologies across the firm. And that is something which has been predicted by a lot of surveys, and this is something which the firm's top leadership is saying. This is not something which is coming from us. Now, we talked about, before I talk about what kind of frauds are happening, I'll just touch upon a very important aspect. Everyone is like in a rat race. Everyone wants to say, what is my AI agenda? What is my Gen AI agenda? Everyone, every firm you talk to, they might not even know about Gen AI, they may not know about AI, but they want to say, okay, this is my AI agenda, right? The biggest challenge is, these are the challenges which they should be really, really, worried about. Model proliferation. Every day, I'm pretty sure we know about the chat GPTs, the co-pilots and all, but there are hundreds of so many LLMs nowadays, hundreds of applications, hundreds of tools which are using LLMs and basically using Gen AI, right? So every day you will see, how many of you heard about some application which is about to replace, chat GPT? Is there someone aware of it? A competitor from China, right? Now, I think if not for the likes of Microsoft and likes of Elon Musk investing in ChatGPT would have run out of money in 6 months. You're talking about the largest LLM model which started, would have run out of money and they would not be operational after 6 months if that funding which was given was not infused into their ecosystem. The same kind of permutation and combination which they had, the same parameters, the deepfake is saying that, you know what, we can do that in $6.5 million. Obviously, the numbers were much, much lower. The final numbers were closer to 90 million, but still 90 million is nothing in front of what the investment goes from a ChatGPT perspective, right? So now every day you'll have their own LLM models. Okay, what is the largest AI or Gen AI model from India? Do we know? Any guesses? which is the largest Gen AI model from India, from a user-based perspective. No. ChatGPT is not Indian, right? I'm talking about Indian AI, Indian Gen AI. Have you guys heard about Perplexity? Okay. Have you heard about Kritium? How many people have heard about Kritium? Yeah, the Ola one, exactly. So that is going to become the number one, which is purely Indian based. Perplexity is still kind of mixed, but yes, Perplexity will take over a lot of things which we do with Google, by the way. So Perplexity is actually becoming the biggest threat to Google, right? So that is the first example of model preparation, right? Second is joint tech strategy thinking. Now this is where I will go back to what Arjun was referring to, right? A lot of times we create, okay, we have to run a Gen AI model, we have to create a Gen AI model, we give it to technology people. Do we even take examples or take inputs from the compliance people, take inputs from the CROs? We are not doing that. And the biggest risk is they are creating in their own silos, solving a technology problem, but every technology problem has to solve a business problem. And that is something which is not accounted for. And that is one of the biggest risks which happens across when you talk about implementation of a technology solution. Ethical and legal scape. We all talk about, Gen AIs and all. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. Because of the DPD Act in India, even Indian customers have become much more, much more wary about their data to be shared with anyone, right? So there was a sue of almost, 10 CR for one of the organization because they shared their data with a third party without even consulting them, right? And that was a very senior person who kind of did this, suing. So that is also very important. You have to make sure that ethical and legal landscape is already taken care of. Rapid development is very similar to model preparation. Basically, model is more about more LLMs being coming in. Rapid tech development, you're talking about every day the technology also changes. So for example, if you're using big data, will big data suffice? I'm pretty sure most of you would have heard, as soon as you talk about Gen AI, you talk about LLM models, people will say, oh, I'll need a GPU. But is GPU the answer? Can you still not work on the CPUs, or can use higher end systems? That is something which we need to actually understand. Obviously, this technology is very new, so obviously a lot of deep talent is lacking. Now, if you talk about, let's say, the MLs, right? MLs, a lot of machine learning people you will get, but if you talk about Gen AI people, everyone is exploring. So getting a good pool of people who can work on this is very, very low. Unintended consequences. Now this ties back to responsible AI. I'll give a classic example. So we are working back with National Health Authority. So we also work back with a lot of doctors as well, because they are also processing the medical claims, right? So we are already in panel with them to evaluate all the claims which are being submitted as part of Ayushman Bharat scheme. Now I'll pivot that, and we are talking to doctors because we are doing the fraud identification. We also propose them, can I use this solution, our Gen AI solution, to predict that what kind of medication should be done. So basically to predict that if let's say cataract had to be done, can I do an auto adjudication of a cataract, right? So doctor said just one thing. You said, okay, cataract, we'll solve it. Let's talk about a simple some person who comes from an stomach pain, and he's saying, I may have to have an appendix operation, right? Based on your model, if the model says operation has to be done, we'll do the operation, but the person is not ready for operation. If anything happens to the person, who will take the responsibility? So that is the example of unintended consequences. So responsible AI is a very important aspect which no one actually talks about. We all talk about, oh, we have to use Gen AI, we have to use AI, but we also have to make sure we are ready with the consequences as well. Future-proofing investment goes back to the same thing, that are we doing some bit of small POC as opposed to doing a full-fledged? Now, the world of waterfall model, that doing an engagement which is for 1 year does not work. You have to start small, you have to do POCs, you have to see which is really working out or not. Maybe for that particular use case, a Gen AI will not be even applicable. I'll give an example because you guys are from compliance. Let's say employee onboarding. So if you want to evaluate and make sure that the employee onboarding is accurate or not, if the documents which are being submitted by employees are really, really fraudulent or not, right? Now, we talked about moonlighting as well. These all issues happened only after COVID, right? The biggest challenge is, if you're only onboarding 10 employees a month or 20 employees a month, do you really want to invest in technology? The answer is no. It will make much more sense to invest in a process where you have a lot of transactions to be looked at, where humanly it is just not possible. I pivot the same thing. A small technology firm may have only 10 onboardings a month, but they may have thousands and millions of transactions on a monthly basis. So you would rather spend money on that as opposed to spending money on this business process. Right sizing projects goes back to the same thing, not spend time. Basically, you have to also make sure the budgets are, very stringent, because a lot of times when you just talk to the engineers, they will ask you the highest of the, composition from a technology perspective. They'll ask, okay, you know what, I need 8 GPUs, I need this high-end system, I need these many people, these many, testing environment, these many UAT environments, these many production environments. The cost of creating the solution itself will go much beyond in terms of what the problems they are going to solve for, right? So that's very important that you do the right sizing. And then the security vulnerabilities which it gets included, right? Bybit was shown by Arjun. I'll just take an example of Bybit itself. The $1.4 billion which you're talking, you know how it was actually taken out? So it was taken out from their wallet, from their company's wallet. So basically, the way it works is you have a wallet, the company will have a wallet of let's say 1.4 billion, right? And that means that is the amount of wallet which was actually being contained by the customers of Bybit, right? And all those numbers, so for example, someone will have 1 million, someone will have 0.1 million, someone will have 100K, 10K, whatever it is, right? That translates into 1.4 billion worth of Ethereum. So now just imagine someone was able to get into the ecosystem and then target the exact wallet which was having Ethereum and then siphon off the money. A siphon of basically all the Ethereums, right? So those are the kind of issues which can easily be done if you're not creating a solution which is not secured enough. I'll take a pause. Any questions on this particular slide? Why we are discussing this? Yes, absolutely. So third party outsourcing is very, very relevant because a lot of times, a lot of processes gets, outsourced as well, right? For example, a lot of payroll, right? Or vendor processing, accounts payable, right? All this process gets outsourced to different, third parties. Absolutely, you should be looking at, what process they are following, what technologies they are following. Are they using? I'll give you a classic example. You might be aware of Jamtara, right? Jamtara case. The Jamtara case actually was a real life case for a lot of Indian companies, especially in the e-commerce and all. You know how the data was being leaked? So does anyone know how the data was actually being leaked? Everyone talked about, okay, we got the phone number and they were getting the calls. But how was the actually data being leaked? What was the source for Jamtara? I'm pretty sure everyone knows about Jamtara. What was the source of leakage of the data? Any guesses? Mobile company. No. It was not mobile companies. Any guesses? No wrong answers. Huh? No, so these are e-commerce firms, right? Think from the e-commerce chain, where the data can go out from the e-commerce chain perspective. These are e-commerce or, sorry? Who said the logistics? Yes, it was through the logistics, because logistics, what happens, all the orders which has to go will go to, let's say you're working with 10 different logistics firms, 10 different logistics firms will get their own set of Excels. And those Excels were being leaked out, and that is how everyone was receiving message, please submit 7,000 rupees because you have won a Bolero. Please submit 10,000 rupees, you won a Scorpio. So that is how the plaguing was happening. So as simple as looking at a business process where you are actually having a data going out of the ecosystem is very, very important. And that is the reason instead of an Excel, if it was an in-paneled system where they can just get the information and pass it on as opposed to an Excel distribution, it would have been much better. And this was happening with all the large firms in India. You talk about Paytm, you talk about Snapdeal, you talk about Airtel, everyone was plagued with it. So now we move into, what kind of frauds can happen. Now, obviously, a lot of frauds can happen. But before this, actually, I'll, go back. Any guesses what kind of frauds can happen? Not prevented, can happen because of AI. Just examples. Go ahead. Okay. More example. I like more. Talk about a use case or a business case or business process where this will happen.
risk values. Means it is not, it is which is not there, and we have to invest in that to mitigate that risk.
So that is more from a perspective of wasting your resources.
Yes.
Not really a financial fraud which has happened. So what you're saying is the fraud never happened. The fraud never happened, but technically you're wasting your energy to find out that. So that's more of a operational issue. I'm talking more from where the money is going out of the ecosystem. Example? Yes.
The voiceover was mentioning that please invest in this particular scheme endorsed by so and so. I think Ankur Wariko also something
Yes.
floating around like that.
So, okay, so that's a good example, but just talk more from your own organization perspective. I think you guys are from various industries, right? Someone will be from FS, someone will be from manufacturing, someone will be from insurance or whatever, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of representation is there. Think from that perspective. Okay, so basically you're talking about, okay, so if you're talking about e-commerce firms and all, everything goes by a GMV. So you're talking, I'm just kind of translating it, that you are creating fake GMV. So for example, everyone at an e-commerce site will be evaluated on the number of transactions and the GMV they are processing. So yes, fake GMV creation, absolutely. Any other examples? Video KYC, yes.
Customers are being sent link for payments with a small change in
The URLs.
yeah.
Perfect. So a lot of frauds which happens, and I'm pretty sure you would have also received. So that's one example. You would also have seen that, instead of a send request because of the UPI, it's basically a collect request. So that is also a fraud which is happening a lot. Any more example? Think from can I get like which industries most of the people you are belong to? Manufacturing. So what fraud can happen? I'll come back to you. What kind of fraud can happen in manufacturing? Huh?
Impacting decision making.
Like
Operation.
example.
Like which it is operational point of view basically.
Okay.
So if where key decision needs to be taken, but the output which the using of AI, it may have given different way.
Okay. But that is
That is
again
a
more
thing.
from an operation. The money will not go out of it. Yes, you were saying something, please.
Taking the draft emails for how to send email for supplier bank account changes.
Okay.
So
Yes.
they are using
Yes.
from the Gen AI the
Yes.
email, and they are using the same for requesting for bank account number changes.
So I'll give a very good example. I'll just correlate. It just not happens with manufacturing. You will be surprised to know even we as EY work a lot on forensics and technology and security. Even our own partner received a phishing email, and he almost paid an amount. Thankfully, he reached out to us. From a forensic perspective, we were able to say it was a complete fake. The fraud was, he was told that he has got obviously I will not name the partner. So he was told that his some photos have been basically they were saying that they have manipulated their photos or something to make an explicit content. And they said, okay, you pay us $15,000 or we will kind of publicize it. And the best part was they created a domain wherein they were able to get an email from his EY email ID to their private email ID, his private email ID or personal email ID. So that is the level of fraud which can also happen. So when you are trying to defraud a system, you can create any different type of documents, any type of frauds, right? So I'll just talk about some of the more frauds. The other frauds which are happening is creation of financial transactions. A lot of times what people are doing are actually creating financial transactions as well. For example, let's say you had to siphon off money. Eventually you want to make sure the control totals are matching, right? Now if you have taken out, let's say $10,000 of the ecosystem, you have to create a transaction in the system, right? So people are using AI and Gen AI to create, I will use Gen AI to create transactions in the ecosystem. I'll give you an example. Have you guys, anyone heard about the Chinese HR who siphoned off close to 8 CR in, some 2 years? Huh? Yeah, exactly. I don't remember the exact amount, but yeah, please talk about it. No, I don't remember. So what she created 18 different employees and created her and made sure that all the 18 employees had their own weekly timesheet to be filled in and siphoned off close to 8 CR in 2 years time. So now that is an example where frauds have been created using Gen AI systems. So I'll talk about some of the examples because these are the examples which are very generic. Insurance frauds is, obviously, insurance is one of the areas where you'll see a lot of frauds. And the reason for that is a reimbursement model. Everywhere you have a reimbursement model, a frauds will happen, right? People, if I talk about motor insurance, right? They will show fake accidental reports. They will show fake accidental photos, right? All those photos are created by Claude. All those photos are created by Canva. These are the places where they go and create this. You will be surprised a lot of investigations which we do when we go to the metadata or the actual looking of the digital footprint of the document, we identify that those documents have been created in Canva. So that is something which we are seeing more and more these days. The other example is looking at manipulation of, from a medical health insurance perspective, right? People try to create synthetic data. So previously what used to happen, especially in medical insurance, right? There were a set of doctors, individuals who were sitting and just creating medical documents which were fraud, right? So there will be obviously likes of Gujarat and Rajasthan where the pockets are the highest fraud rates, right? There used to be doctors or set of people or a cartel of people who used to do it. Now they don't even need a cartel of people. They can actually use AI to generate those documents where the actual surgery never happened, the actual documentations were never been, that person never even visited that hospital for that matter, but the entire documentation has been created and the money has been taken out of the ecosystem. We were working back with another of the insurance providers and they received 35 claims which we flagged off. They were like, why you have flagged off? And we were able to prove that out of those 35 claims, only the first claim was the genuine claim, remaining 34 claims were created by a system. Basically, they use the same entire report, everything, right from discharge summaries to diagnostic reports to their all their X-rays and the MRIs and everything, all their reports. They had changed only the name, age, and the admission date and the discharge date. Everything else was same. So first person, they recreated 34 different documents using that, and so 35 claims, and they were paid as well. So when it came to us in our queue, we said, you should have not paid. I don't know how many they were able to recover. Sorry? No, no, ma'am. So think from this perspective. Copy pasting, you're doing it manually because I'm giving you an example of 35. Now think you have to create millions of transactions like that, right? Yeah. No, so that also happens. So I am giving different examples. So the other use case where we solved for, we saw a use case wherein almost 350 claims were created by a system. I will not say human or what, I cannot comment on that. Wherein we saw a certain spike of typhoid, right? And obviously typhoid has to have certain parameters to it, right? All those are coming from 2 hospitals and all those were created documents. So those things where you have to, now we are talking about 10, 15, 20, right? But when you have to do it at a larger scale, right? That is where you need to use the systems. So they create systems that basically have an RPA. They will say, okay, do this, now change this, change this. That's all they have to do. Yeah.
I have a doubt on this. Like, obviously, in insurance claim, I can see that only one person is, there are, say, we are around 300 here. Okay. If I have to submit a claim, I should file it. So you mean to say if there are 300 people, so on behalf of these 300 insured people, one person has done it, and do they know that their data is being used for filing the claims?
Absolutely.
So indirectly, I am a genuine customer. Yes. I didn't do anything wrong.
You didn't do anything wrong. It's all about the remaining 34 people who were actually using your credentials. I'll give you more example in terms of health insurance itself, right? We are working with one of the private TPAs, third-party administrators, right? So obviously in medical insurance, typically the TPAs process the claims, right? So this was a corporate example, right? So corporates like you and us. So they were a couple of friends, and all of a sudden, that person met, the HR person met that individual and said, hey, I got to know that your mom went through a cataract operation. How is she? And they were like, cataract operation? I don't know. And then what? And then obviously we kind of flagged it off initially itself that it was a fake claim. When they did the investigation, it was confirmed that the friend of that individual who she asked, right? The friend of that individual took all his documents, and only at the time of the bank statement where they have reimbursement model, right? In the check, he just changed the account number. Everything else, the right from the KYCs and everything was used for that particular individual. So that is the kind of fraud which happens, which can easily be done by systems. And now you need solutions to identify those kind of frauds. But the whole essence is, yes, it is very helpful, but how do you kind of curtail it's very, very important. It's like, you can have a Ferrari, but you have to make sure that you have enough fuel to run it. Now that was the example of insurance fraud. Now ID theft is a very, very big issue in terms of customer onboarding, and it doesn't matter to which industry you're talking about. Even in you talk about manufacturing or OEMs, right? You talk about onboardings of their partners as well. It could be third parties, vendors, or whatever. When you talk about more from an NBFC or insurance or NBFC insurance or more from a FS perspective, there also a lot of customer onboarding happens, right? A lot of KYC theft happens, and the reason why this happens, I'll tell you. Because of the ability to generate photos, ability to generate issues. Now, when you do a validation of a document, I'll take a voter ID example. If you take my voter ID and run it through the EIC, okay, you'll use my voter ID and you'll confirm whether my father name is exact same or not, right? And you'll pass it on. But no system checks the actual face on it. And there's no API to check the face on it, right? That is where a lot of fraud happens. I'll give an example. We were working at one of the NBFCs. It was in the news as well, wherein a lot of ID theft happened. They deal with providing auto loans basically, right? And the fraud which was happening was the same photo was used across multiple IDs, as big as 18 or 16 different loan accounts as well. So what will happen? Amit Mishra's voter ID is there, and let's say XYZ voter ID is there. When you look their name and father combination, it will reflect correct, but the photo across both the IDs was same. So now what is happening? Someone is using my ID and recreating set of documents to get the loan processed. So those are the kind of frauds which happen in the ID theft. The other thing which happens, we talk about account takeovers. Here, please.
So, especially in the bank side, the thing is the check fraud actually. Normally,
yes.
Kind of thing actually. Somebody, you courier the check to somebody, the courier guy take the check, and the signature of these people have been taken and everything. And now only the banks are come up with the notifying if the check transaction is more than
a certain amount, threshold checking, yes.
But if it is less than that amount, people are making lot of frauds, and check trip, it is happening.
So yeah, so that is the typical example of how. So what we are seeing, especially because we work in this field, right? Previously, whatever frauds were happening, right? Those frauds are reoccurring just through a different mechanism now. What used to be typical fraud? Someone will change the account number in the bank account at the time of vendor processing and rechange it to the previous value after the transaction has been processed. The same thing is happening today also. It's just that a new transaction is created to kind of net of that particular transaction. So similar kind of patterns is being followed, just the mechanism has changed. Because eventually you can only do certain types of frauds. I will not talk about cyber because that's a different ball game altogether. But in terms of typical process related frauds are still following the same concept, the mechanism has changed. Yes, ma'am.
Something like that is clearly, an open source. Somebody else knows which client I'm working for.
Absolutely.
And they simply search.
Absolutely.
That's it, they've got it all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the reason, we have to make sure, especially when you're using any of the, models, I would say, I will not name anyone, right? The biggest challenge is it enterprise approved or not? I'll give you a classic example. If I can use also ChatGPT. Now if I open ChatGPT, it'll ask me, why do you want to open a ChatGPT? Because EY have its own LLM, which is called EYQ. So now, if you're not using the enterprise level approved application, it's always a challenge. So yes, you can use whatever from a learning perspective, you want to write something, yes. But if I have to create a proposal, and let's say, I'm just throwing an example. Let's say I have to create a proposal for Mahindra, right? I'm just naming a random client, right? I cannot put in, okay, you know what, this is the value proposition that, okay, I have to have 1 CR worth of revenue and, you know, I'll be looking at this particular process, I'll be evaluating this particular set of transactions. I cannot do that to create that proposal. Those are the things which are very, very important. So if you're using an enterprise approved application, at least they will make sure that the entire security and everything is taken care by them. So now today, if I can just show that also. If I try to open ChatGPT in my EY laptop, what will happen is they will ask me to kind of approve that why do you want to go it. So those are the things which you have to have controls and measures to make sure that you're not providing information which is not needed to the end these kind of models.
One more example actually.
Yes,
is,
sir.
the domain of an email has been theft and the customer has been sent a mail that bank account has been changed, you send the money to this account.
Yes.
And
they will change, they will do that. Yeah, absolutely. So that happens in the vendor. It's a classic example. The same thing used to happen before also, sir, right? That someone will say that, okay, vendor ABC, my bank account has changed. They will take the same domain of where the email was coming from and they will send it. So see, that's what I'm saying. The same things happening. Previously, we used to send let's say an email or through a physical mail. Now we are trying to do this through any kind of notification, maybe notification on the vendor portal itself, right? So again, as I said, the types of frauds is still the same. It's just a mechanism have changed and evolved. I would say not changed, actually evolved.
I have a doubt regarding the bank transfer. Have the banks actually started verifying both the name and
No, they have actually got rid of it, which is very surprising. So they have got rid of it. So previously it was mandatory to make sure the beneficiary information and the account information matches. RBI has actually gone away from it. Okay, so I'm not aware if they have reintroduced, so my bad on that. But I know that as of September 21 or something, they kind of stopped it. So if they have reintroduced, it's very good, ma'am. Yeah, so I'm not aware, so that is bad on my part.
but I don't think banks are actually following. Even in many reverse speed, they are not getting that.
But anyways, to solve that, anyways, you have APIs. So what you can do is you have given APIs to do a penny drop testing, and that you can always verify it. No. So you have APIs where you will also get the beneficiary name as well. So you can get a based on the bank account number, you will get the IFSC and the beneficiary name. There are APIs for it, and then you can do a comparison that okay, if it says Amit Mishra as opposed to Amit Singh, it's an anomaly. If it says Amit Mishra, it's not an anomaly. There are APIs. They also use so now what the thing which has happened is, because we are talking about this topic, previously it always used to be a penny drop. Now they have said no penny drop as well, ma'am. This I am aware of. That they have started that without even actually, so there used to be like a 0.1 or a 0.99 rupees transaction, right? Now they have done a penny less as well, which is out without anyone dropping a penny, you will get the response back that who is the beneficiary. So even that is enabled now. Now the financial transaction frauds which I was talking about is very, very important. The payroll fraud which we spoke about is classic example how people try to maneuver through the system. Other examples which also has is like, if let's say you have to siphon off money. I'll give you a classic example. Okay, we all are from IIA and compliance. When okay, I'm asking a very controversial question, but if you are making any government payments, right, you have to be compliant as well. How do you kind of camouflage that transaction? We all know that we do that, right? Admin, legal, marketing, right? Now what's happening, people have gone beyond it as well. People are saying, you know what, let the system define on the basis for all the data which you have, right? Which is the most prominent area or prominent expense head where this transaction can be created of. So instead of you deciding it has to be sitting under a marketing spend or a legal spend or an advisory spend, the system will tell you, okay, you know what, if you have to create a transaction like this, which head it should belong to. So even that is something which the system can use. So again, the whole point is system has capability to help. Whether you want to abuse or you want to take the help, it totally depends on the individual. How much time we have? It's not showing up. How much time we have? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'll just quickly talk about some of the more examples, especially in the insurance itself, right? Huh? Okay, yeah, that's what. So then what I'll do is I'll try to quickly go through. I already spoke about it, so I'll kind of skip this, right? This is one slide which is very, very important. So we talked about what kind of frauds can happen. We talked about, what is AI, ML and Gen AI and everything, right? But the most important thing is in your ML, AI, Gen AI journey, right? These are the things which you need to make sure that you are accounting for as any firm, right? This is something which is very, very important. Trust and accuracy. Certain process, I'll give an example for trust and accuracy, right? When you are dealing with vendors, you are okay to have an accuracy of 70%, okay? Because in that case, the vendor has to prove that he has given a genuine transaction and he has not done a fraud. That is something he has to prove. So even a 70% accuracy still works if you are predicting something. But pivot that to your own set of employee expenses. In there, you have to be closer to 90%. Because even one employee, if he is being questioned and he was proven not to be guilty, that's a big dent on the firm. Because what happens is a lot of noise will actually start occurring, right? So that's the reason you have to make sure you create your thresholds and everything based on the use case, based on the problem statement you are solving for. Do not filter everything into, okay, I have to have 90%. No, you don't have to. I have to have 70%. No, there's no benchmarking to it. There's no mathematics to it. It has to be driven by the process. It has to be driven by the risk appetite as a firm you want to have. Give an example. We were working with one of the largest banks in India, in the world. We were looking at the T&E expenses, right? Typically, T&E expenses, if let's say me and one of my other employee or even a colleague sends the same bill, you will say that, okay, it's a fraud. You will definitely say it's a fraud, right? But that particular firm said, you know what? Because our policies are not that stringent, we will not flag it as fraud. We'll let go of those kind of transactions. But unless I can prove that, yes, a document was manipulated, a transaction was manipulated, only in those cases we will actually take a decision. So again, now if I pivot to the same thing, we also do our own audit of our EY expenses in India, right? So all the Indian based employees, whatever expenses they submit, our team actually does the audit for them as well, for our finance team. Their duplicate is flagged off. That's obviously this should not be paid off, and all these people get their notifications. So so I'm part of the technology team at Forensics, and one of the classic things happens that our technology leader who is there, his own claim was actually flagged by the system because his SECI submitted the same transaction because there was a gap of 2 weeks because there was a long period of holiday. So she thought that she never submitted this claim and she submitted the same document again. So that is how the technology works. If you configure it for it, doesn't matter who the individual is, right? It will flag out those transactions. The second is fairness and bias. I think we all were talking about fairness and bias, right? It has to be dependent on what kind of problem or issue you are solving for. Yes, biases will be there. I'll give you a classic example. You talk to GPT, you say that, no, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. After third time, it will give you anything. Whatever you say, it will give you that answer only. So that is a biasness. So you have to make sure that you are using that biasness for, constructive as opposed to kind of making it worse actually. Privacy and security is very, very important. We already spoke about, how the data should not be shared. Security and everything is very, very important. Try to use enterprise applications, try to use enterprise approved, solutions and everything. And, keep yourself away. I'll talk about the examples that, people, as soon as we get an email, a lot of frauds are also happening because of, getting emails from, your Microsoft account is logged, right? So those kind of frauds are also happening. So be aware of that as well. Regulation law, very important. Make sure that your legal team is kind of approving of whatever we are doing, whether we are sharing data, whether we are doing any kind of research or whatever, please make sure they are aware of it. Product innovation, very important to use for the use case which you really need to solve for. And cost to serve is very important. A lot of times people, I'll give you an example, I'll not talk about just AI, I'll give you another example. A lot of times we buy a very expensive tool or a solution, right? And we don't know how to use it. And then to make sure that we are able to use it, we spend a lot of time to make it work for our use case. And then realize that, you know what, it's not working out, and then eventually you kind of, take that out, kind of dispose of that solution and use another process, right? So those things have to be already accounted for, that, is it really the right solution? So make sure that what is the cost to serve or actually solve a business problem is very, very important. Future reliance is very, very relevant here, right? You have to be resilient in terms of what the future can make. Every day technology changes. Do you really want to change every day? No. Is it possible to change every day? No. But do you want to adapt to it? Yes. That's the reason you try to have something which is flexible enough. So if you create a very tightly coupled process, you will not be able to change over the period of time. And then employee productivity, obviously it will increase with the use of technology. Some of the key governance considerations are strategic alignment. Make sure that whatever strategy you are creating, everyone is aligned to it and everyone is bought into it. Best example, if you are creating a technology solution, it should be signed off by the business, like compliance, like IAs, and also the actual business users as well, right? Regulatory compliance, very, very important. The last thing you want is, getting penalized by the, any of the regulators. Okay, which is the biggest firm which actually kind of had the downfall because of regulatory compliance? We all know that. Paytm. And Paytm was supposed to be, and Paytm was actually the biggest, technology firm you can think from an India perspective, right? They were the leaders and innovators of everything you can think of. As a matter of fact, they were the people who were able to, launch FASTags in record time of 21 days, right? So that is the technology firm we are talking about, but it went to the wane because of regulatory issues. Cyber and data security, Bybit example we saw. I will talk about an Indian firm itself. I'm pretty sure during COVID period you might have heard that Cognizant actually had a cyber attack as well, right? So obviously that is the kind, if a technology firm who is such big can also be, kind of played because of the cyber and security issues, you can imagine it can happen with anyone, right? So you have to be very diligent in terms of what's being, done from a security perspective. The DLPs of the world, having any kind of monitoring solutions, you have to enable that, right? And brand and experience is very important. At the end of the day, every one of us represents our brand. I represent, EY for that matter. Someone else will be from Ford, someone will be from Apollo Hospitals or whatever, right? We represent our own brand. So we need to make sure that we are taking the custody of what we are actually doing. With that, I'll take a pause. I actually wanted to talk about one of the solutions which we have, but I don't think we have the time, so we'll discuss it offline. Happy to take any questions now. Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think you are probably providing a lot of examples based on the real-time experience which you had with your clients. I was just, a lot of things were going in the mind when you were discussing or probably sharing it. So what we typically do is we can't mitigate things that we don't know that exist. For example, say we talk about known unknowns, unknown unknowns,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So let me talk about unknown unknowns and let me go from that point of view,
yes.
Right? From the sessions that we have got, what we have actually encountered in the last 2 days, right, and even the earlier session, is it really right to look at possible solutions to predict the oncoming risk or a fraud, or rather build or create flexible AI systems that can adapt to, probably to the quickly to the absorb the shocks or the whatever it is a resultant of it. Second question is, right, we always tend to use this concept of Pareto, right, everywhere for doing the root cause analysis.
Yes.
Definitely it will also be used in your investigation.
Yes, 80-20.
Yeah. So we say vital few and trivial many. But in most of the fraud cases we look at, right, we tend to ignore those unforeseeable risks which typically stem from weak signals. And we ignore it because we thought, or what we're thinking, that those weak signals are insignificant at that point of time. Even for the example which Arjun was saying, again, the jewelry case, it happened after 14 years. So how do you really look at, when you start, building this kind of systems, which, hey,
So I'll answer the first question, initial question first, right? Your question was, how do we make sure that system is adaptable enough, and do we really need to go for a system which is off the shelf? It totally depends on the use case, and I'll give you two use cases, right? Let's say you're talking about employee expense where you see a lot of manual intervention. That someone, let's say a firm is there, it has global operations, and they have to take, let's say, 20 different countries they are operating in. So they have, and centrally it is being managed by India, right? A lot of GCCs are doing that, right? So now they will take those 20 different languages, they will convert it manually or whatever, and then they will see whether those transactions are right or not, and eventually put into the system. It goes for process. A lot of manual intervention is there. Do you use a technology there? Absolutely. Now, do you want to use a system which is custom based? Absolutely. There you have to use a custom based. You really don't need to go to a third party solution to do that. Absolutely. Now talk about a different use case. Now you're dealing with your vendor use cases, right? In vendor, a lot of fraud happens, right? Now fraud is a very subjective topic. The solution is not just a technology solution, please understand. It also embeds a lot of forensics work which has been done by those firms, right? Which has been dealing in this kind of issues over the period of time, and they have created a solution. In that use case, you have to go to a firm which has done this kind of work or this kind of engagement and has a solution of it, right? Which can solve it for you. So it depends on the use case, but yes, that's the reason I've been saying you have to go use case and process wise as opposed to using again same bill for everything. You should not do that. So you have to go, you have to be smart enough to say, use this use case, we'll do it internally, this use case, we'll use experts. Because even if you want to create something which is not available in within your ecosystem, it will be very difficult, right? The second question is very difficult to answer, honestly, because there will be always the unknown unknowns, right? The only thing you can do is, how do you have better controls? I'll give you an example itself, right? Let's say the CFO, the example, I'll not take the jewelry example, I'll take the CFO and the finance control example, right? There, if, let's say, even if you want to do a transaction, right? Because he was still a finance controller, right? There has to, because he was transferring, I'm pretty sure, a big amount of money, right? There should have been a approval mechanism, right? Because it was not there, he kind of bypassed it. That's the reason it happened, right? So everywhere, so the maker-checker concept you have to have it, whether it's an AI system, non-AI system, a process, doesn't matter. As long as you have a maker-checker and make sure that maker-checker is independent, only then you can do it. And then also, obviously you can have a technology. Now these things, I'll tell you what could have happened. If, let's say, this amount, whatever you're talking about, right? If there was a system, in place, which was for a continuous monitoring perspective. If you have transaction threshold, it would have been flagged off that itself, right? Now this amount is big. Even if you're doing 10 transactions, that amount is more than $25 million, which means it was huge, right? From Indian rupees perspective. You have to have transaction monitoring controls, right? That anything above 1 CR has to go through this approval process. Will be flagged off, it will go through a different league altogether. It will not get auto submitted or auto paid, right? So those kind of controls you need to bake in. Yeah, I saw some hands here. Yeah, please go ahead. Mics. Yes.
Hi, my name is Vaiti Subramanian. I come from a fintech. The question that I have is how much of a burden that these regulations actually put on the PSPs, right? Because the challenge that I have, particularly not from India perspective, like say from UK and EU perspective, right? For example, last year we had something called as the Authorized Push Payment Fraud Act came up in UK. It eventually says that if somebody is siphoned off their money, they should be reimbursed £85,000 per claim. It's capped at that level per claim, right, for per customer, and it has to be done in 5 business days. That puts a lot of stress, right? So what is, can I say from a maturity perspective, particularly from a fraud detection controls, is something that organizations can feel that is optimal, right?
Yeah, so very good question, and I'll talk about a classic example. NBFCs, fintechs and everything, right? I think what has happened over the period of time, not just RBI, I'm talking global regulators, right? Banks, they have made sure that they are very compliant, right? They have beaten to death to make sure that they are very compliant. NBFCs, fintechs, they were still okay with it because the whole concept was to quick disbursement sort of amount, right? That was the whole concept of fintechs, right? And obviously other products as well. The biggest challenge which we have is a lot of firms, especially go back to Paytm example itself. Do you think Paytm was not aware of these issues? How many think that Paytm was not aware of these issues? Okay, I cannot share more details, but Paytm was aware of these issues. It's just that because they thought that, they are the leaders, they will get away by just paying fine. And then RBI took a decision, again, you know what, the fine doesn't suffice. That's how it works, right? Typically, we always said, and you don't have to come to EY or any other firm, we call something called a fraud risk assessment. And every key processes should actually go through that exercise. It's as simple as that. We do it for global clients, we do it for Indian clients. That process has to be enabled. It's a very quick exercise. It's not a very, 6 months exercise. It's a very quick exercise, each process. You do the fraud risk assessment, and itself will call out these kind of issues. If you have regulatory issues like this, right, they will be saying, okay, what should be your, maybe your DO has to change, maybe your technology has to change, maybe you have to have transaction monitoring, whatever. Those things will have to happen. So you have to go through a FRA process, and that will solve a lot of issues. Will it solve all the issues? No. But will it curtail a lot of leakages? Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So interesting example. Do we really know what was the issue? We all know that 1500 CR and 1900 CR. Do we really know what happened actually? Huh? No, but derivatives, exactly what happened?
Exactly what has happened, RBI has told earlier not to enter into internal trades, whereas forex trade has been taken by the forex desk, and as a hedge they have undertaken in domestic trade within the company. Like the risk is changed from left pocket to right pocket, from forex desk to internal desk, and it was actually never hedged, and went into accounting practice, went for a long time. Accumulated losses have come to this size. The loss has happened because of the unhedged positions which are open for a long time, and how they are treating forex deal vis-a-vis internal trade. So this gap was.
So what you're talking about is more from an operation perspective. From a dollar value perspective or amount perspective, they actually lost because of the forex changes.
Yeah.
So the rate of
Yen.
right? So the main issue was because of the Indian rupee was actually depreciating. That delta which was there, let's say 7 rupees or 8 rupees or whatever that was, right? Because they did basically derivative for, I don't know, 20, I'm just throwing out numbers, right? 20 million at 80 rupees. Now 20 million at 87 rupees. That 7 has got created this $1,600 or 1,600 CR.
Gap. But surprisingly, how it went unnoticed by so many audits.
So yeah, that's very right. A lot of times what happens, right? These numbers, right, will always be sitting idle there because there is no actual transactions happening.
Exactly.
And intercompany transactions are actually one of the most classic examples of not being monitored, I would say, because eventually let's say, Indus is obviously a bigger bank, but especially promoter-driven firms, right? Intercompany transactions are the biggest risk we always have. But the problem is because the promoter or the CEO is directly involved, a lot of times people do not really question them. It's a classic example of people not following up in terms of a DOA. It doesn't matter you are a CEO or a CEO. Your firm is going for a toss.
Exactly.
So you have to make those calls. See, I forget about this, right? Those are just a loss, right? Eventually, it's not really a loss if you see, right? It's just basically an accounting misstatement which has happened. No real loss has happened except for that, whatever, this
Rupee depreciation
has happened, right? No actual transaction loss has not happened. It's basically a loss of what the overall exchange rate has kind of reduced, right? But think about Lehman Brothers. Right? What happened in that case? Most of the transactions, if you see, you pick any of the biggest frauds which has happened in the world, right? Or the firms which have quit, Satyam, everywhere it was all intercompany transactions which were the biggest issue.
Correct. Arm's length relationship. The Lehman Brothers quote is nothing is left on the right side. Right side, nothing is left. Left side, nothing is right.
Unfortunately, we all employees here, so I think we get penalized and I would say taxed by the Indian government. But all the peoples like Nirav Modi's and the Vijay Mallya's do not have to face any wrath. That's the unfortunate reality in India. So. Sure.
Apart from the traditional frauds getting used to AI,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain exclusive frauds which maybe
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. 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 So this is a very good question. Very good question. I'll tell you classic example. Okay, which firm do you belong to, sir? Oh, you should be sitting separately. Okay, so you guys are from Stancy, sir. Which firm you are from? Okay. Now you are with whom? Huh? Okay, independently, right? So independent firm versus you guys are city, right? SDFC, Stancy. Okay, Stancy, right? I'll ask a very good example. I do an FRA with you guys, right? And I identified, let's say these are the 10 different things which we identified. When I go to him, right? Don't you think whatever learnings I'll always transpose it here? So it's always a learning process, right? Imagine it not just EY. You talk about any firm, right? At EY, within forensics, we have more than 70 director and above people, which means they will be working back with a lot of clients, right? So whatever learnings are there will eventually go back to the system and say, ecosystem and say, you know what, these are the new types of frauds which we are able to encounter. Now, the solution which I was going to talk about was actually a solution which identifies a document fraud, right? That is not something which was there 4 years back. It was created only after COVID, because after COVID, everything was digitized, right? So as you rightly mentioned, it's an evolving process. It's always a cat and mice. We learn, we replicate, we learn, we replicate, we try to enhance the offerings overall. So that is how it happens. Mm-hmm. No, no, absolutely. The FRA is not, so FRA during the FRA process, right, which is fraud risk assessment, there is no technology assessment just from an analytics perspective to identify trends. There will be field of investigators who are CAs basically, right? All those people are the people who are doing that particular investigations. It is not nothing to do with technology. Technology will be just an enabler to identify, let's say, an issue or something, right? It's pure play CA people who have done investigations for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in their life, and investigation is what they have done, are the people who are going to do the FRA. Mm-hmm. So forcing, so that is not really, see, honestly think from this perspective. Huh. Correct. Uh-huh. Yeah, all those. Yes. Yeah. So that you're talking about more from a testing. There are multiple offerings which you'll have, right? Now, will FRA solve everything? No, FRA is more about looking at whatever has happened in the past. Last, let's say the review period could be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever, right? Whatever has happened in the past, how do you make sure that you improve for the future, right? What you're talking about, anticipating what kind of issues can go wrong. So obviously the fraud risk repository is already, right? It gets updated every now and then you obviously change over the period of time. So for example, maybe as a forensic specialist, right? I'll give an example. Let's say we would have not worked a lot on blockchains, right? Blockchain was supposed to be the biggest innovation in the last decade, which never, obviously, because of a lot of issues, and especially from an infra perspective, it was not possible in India to actually continue with it, right? But have we done work on blockchain as well? Are there firms which are doing a lot of, generating a lot of revenue on blockchains and cryptos? Absolutely. So that is the learning phase. Yes, not all things will be identified at the pretext of it. That's the reason it's not, say, when we go to the client, right? It's always what we know and what processes you are also aware of. It's always a combination. We say, okay, how do we solve for it? Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. It will not be always on the existing fraud. So see, what now you're talking to the next level of using technology, how to involve it, right? So now you're talking about from a data perspective. When you talk about technology, everything is data driven. What she is talking about is just not data driven, it's functional driven. Now, there could be frauds which can never identify in data. I'll give a classic example itself. The example which you're talking about from a bank account change perspective, that will never flow into the data, because after the bank account changes, it is sitting in the master in the transactional data you're reviewing. There is no way you will say that there was an issue. Transactional data was clean only, right? It was supposed to be paid to EY Amit Mishra, let's say 10 lakh rupees. This is what has been paid off. The master data was changed only at the time of transaction, it has been resetted, right? So those kind of issues will always happen. So that's the reason we have to evolve and segregate where that where basically the technology will help, where the functional will help. And that's the reason if you see any forensic, just not us, right, any forensics practice will always have multiple division. They will have someone who takes care only for a functional perspective, the CAs of the world. Technology perspective. Within technology, you'll have multiple facets of it. People focusing on cyber, people focusing on AI ML, people focusing on pure play analytics, people focusing on data science, people focusing on disk imaging as well, right? When you have to do an investigation, you have to take your servers, backups, the laptop backups and everything. So people focus on that as well. Similarly, we'll also have certain people who come back from a law perspective because they have to review a lot of documents. They have to review that, okay, you cannot just fire an individual. Even if you identify a fraud, you can just not fire it. You have to create a series of documents to say that, so that tomorrow he should not come back and sue you that it was a, you know, it was a wrong termination, right? So a lot of those things have to be accounted for. So it's just not technology, it's just not functional, it's just not legal. It's always a combination of it. And every big or large engagement which we do will always have a combination of all the three. It will never be standalone. Especially technology and the functional people will always be hand in hand. Legal depends on, you know, what kind of issue we are solving for.
As a follow-up question to your current point, how are law enforcement agencies geared up for this? Because
For this means?
For any kind of fraud itself, not only AI fraud, because getting them to fight a criminal complaint itself is becoming a bigger task nowadays. Because RBI wants to file a legal complaint before filing it with them. But filing that itself is becoming a problem for a regular case itself.
Correct. So it's all, see, at the end of the day, it's always about priorities. I'll be honest. It's always about priorities. Is the regulators, so you know, right, there have been many new regulatory bodies which has been created in the last decade, right? ED was one, right? RBI was used to do from a financial fraud, everything was meant ED, right? Then there is, you know, economic social welfare wing as well, which also looks at fraud which is doing from a scheme level perspective, right? ED is there for any kind of frauds which happens from a, you know, any kind of a AML perspective. Then you have the RBIs of the world, then you have the FIUs of the world. So there are a lot of regulatory bodies which are created to identify financial frauds and kind of combat it, but it always try to find a bigger fish. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
I'm talking about local law enforcement agencies.
Local law enforcement.
State police, because that's where we typically go and file, right?
See, now you're talking, so that is something which no one can answer for. I'll tell you the reason for it. The cyber crimes, you might have been hearing this, you know, home arrest and all, right? This has been happening for a very long time. Only after a lot of people have faced the wrath of it, they started doing it. If you pick up the newspaper, this started 3-4 months back, just go back almost 15 months back, you pick a newspaper every week, and I can bet on it, every week you'll find a case where home arrest issue was there. Every week, you will find issues where people were home arrested, and even smart people who are working in the IT industry, who are working with the firms like HCL, the Tech Mahindras of the world, into technology world, even they were being defrauded, right? So, you know, local, you know, regulatory bodies, there's no answer to it. Only at a central level you can get. But again, until something becomes a big issue, like now every call you do, okay, if you are getting a call or a OTP or whatever, do not respond. Those things will only happen when you see a mass issues. Local regulatory, I don't see any you know, change in terms of how they are actually dealing with it. I don't see any change. And I don't even foresee a change, honestly, because that's the reason they are creating these regulatory bodies at a central level. So the ED was started in 2015, ESW was started in 2017, so a lot of regulatory bodies are created like that. Now you're talking more from an ecosystem that has gone beyond technology, right? You're talking about humans and people assets, right? So that's always questionable. But yes, what you're talking about is the ideal state. I'll give you an example, NHA, you talk about insurance fraud is very big fraud, right? You might be aware that that's the reason IIA has kind of started something called a national exchange, right? Where all the claims which are being submitted, are being committed centrally, as opposed to Reliance one goes to Reliance and Aditya Birla goes to Aditya Birla, because the biggest issue was the same set of document was submitted to Aditya Birla, same set of document was submitted to Reliance, right? So obviously the government is taking steps, but obviously it takes time. You cannot do, you're talking about a 1.5 billion people, so obviously you have to make sure.
Insurance today, they are coming back. Like in case of health insurance, we are counterfeiting, cross-checking the hospital records. Unless the hospital goes hand in glove, it is not possible. Likewise.
No, but so I'll tell you, medical insurance is very close to my heart. So I can tell you, within medical insurance, it depends on the policies and depends on the type of frauds and the player of the frauds as well, right? Are you talking about beneficiary fraud? Are you talking about the provider fraud? Are you talking about the insurance fraud, right? Like basically the provider fraud, insurance provider, not the provider from a hospital perspective, right? So it totally depends what kind of fraud you really want to kind of identify. I'll give you an example. When you talk to NHA, National Health Authority, there is no customer fraud, there is no beneficiary fraud. The fraud is happening from the hospital side, right? Now when you talk about private insurance, it's totally dependent on the customer fraud, which is basically beneficiary fraud, because the customer or someone on behalf of customer is doing the fraud. When the fraud is happening in the, let's say NHA, the person who is processing the claim has to be involved. Only then that fraud can happen. But in this case, the processor may not be even involved, but the fraud can happen. So it totally depends what kind of fraud you're trying to identify. Yeah, absolutely. Employees are involved. Without that, I gave an example of that, right? That private TPA, that employee defrauded his own firm only, right? He got a cataract, I think the bill was close to 48,000 rupees. And it just came out because we were running the fraud model. It was flagged off, but no investigation was done. Investigation was done after this, because not everything they can also investigate, right? So because it was called up by the HR person, it was carried out, and obviously then the investigation had, the claims had actually had a lot of wrath from the leadership, because our system flagged it, they never took a decision. Blockchain is, I'll tell you, I'll just summarize in a single statement. Blockchain is very powerful. It's just that you need a lot of infrastructure. The same issue which you are facing with Gen AI, when you talk about blockchain, it is 10x, if not 2x, if not 20x. So that's the biggest challenge. Why do you think blockchain was not successful? Blockchain was supposed to solve all financial transactions across the world. But why it was not successful? Because the type of infrastructure it needs from a mining perspective is just humongous, and not everyone. So think from this. Okay, you are from Stancy. Think about smaller firms which are having a total revenue and total book of 1,000 CR. Can they afford a system like that? No. And most of our firms will be like that, right? So blockchain, yes. Can it solve the issues? Absolutely. Is that the problem solver? Yes. Is that the answer to India? No. Globally, yes, because of the infra needs. I think I already gone much over, but yeah.
It was a very nice lecture from Amit Mishra. Thank you very much. If you have any more questions, you can ask him across personally during your lunch break. Thank you very much, Mishra, for a very interesting and interactive session. On behalf of IIA Madras chapter, a token of memento to you.